Okay, we're back. So yeah, it's like I was saying. I mean, I I, I feel like Larkin has most of the leverage here, and unfortunately, you're going to have to give him whatever he wants because if it's like I said before, if he walks for nothing, I don't care what your last name is. I don't care how many cups you won for this team. I don't care what you did in Tampa. If he walks for nothing, your ass is on a hot seat.
And notably, the Red Wings do have just under $42.5 million in cap space. And I think that's not including, this is for next season, but I think that's also not including Jacob Verana's contract, which is buried in the AHL along with Nedeljkovic. Now, granted, Nedeljkovic, there's a good possibility that he just might not be on this team next year. That's something we'll touch on as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next player. Let's talk about Andrew Kopp. Andrew Kopp recently was just signed as a free agent this offseason. Came in to pretty much take over the 2C role from what Suter had to take on last year, and it's an upgrade for sure. However, there has been a bit of a slow start for Andrew Kopp. Granted, he did have that off-season muscle core surgery, so that definitely took a toll on him, where he didn't get to do any off-ice or on-ice training throughout the whole entire off-season. He didn't get to participate in any of the training camps, the preseason games, and just went headfirst into the full season and played game one and has been playing ever since. So, I mean, right now, last couple of weeks, he has definitely picked it back up. I mean, he's got 26 points in 48 games. He's on pace to have a pretty decent season so far. But what are your thoughts so far on Andrew Kopp's first season as a Red Wings, and how do you feel about him being our 2C, and how do you see him projected moving forward?
Yeah, I think as far as Andrew Kopp goes, I understand that he missed some time in the off season. I know that he has a large army of haters out there. I don't really understand why. I mean, we kind of signed him with the expectation that his value isn't really going to all come from his point production. It's more so the intangibles, like his 200-foot game, his face-off percentage. I don't know if people are expecting we would sign this guy and he's a 60-point player right away. He's never been that. But I like the signing. Um, I think as far as 2C right now, with the level of talent this team has, he's really more of a patchwork 2C. Once we get potentially someone else in free agency who can naturally play that, or Casper develops into that, he'll go back into 3C, and I think that's where he'll really start to thrive. Actually, come to think of it, I think a lot of people are down on him because they're expecting him to be a solid 2C when he's not really supposed to be that. So that actually makes more sense than I put two and two together. But no, I like him. I think with him, you know what you're getting, and you typically every night get it. So I do overall like the signing. And out of the two long-term deals that Eisman made last summer, that one is a good one. We can talk about the other one later on, but that one's a good one.
Yeah, and I'll admit it. I definitely was on the Andrew Kopp hating train for quite some time at the start of the season. It just he didn't quite look like what I was expecting on the ice for the first month. And granted, that was still in mind with everything that happened in the offseason with that surgery and what he missed. And I guess when we signed Andrew Kopp, for me, I am to blame for this too, because I did kind of expect him to be a 20 goal scorer, 60-point kind of player. I kind of thought maybe there was an opportunity for him to get anywhere from 60 to 70 points. Now, mind you, that was also looking at the roster when it was before first game day. No one was injured. The whole team was healthy. You had Verana and you had Nedeljkovic and you had Tyler Bertuzzi. And looking at a Robbie Fabry on the roster, and a Philip Zadina if you even want to toss him in there. So
we'll do that.
I do firmly believe that if we had, and I know that this is very unrealistic, but I do believe that if the roster was 50% more healthy than what it was for the first half of the season, we would be talking about a completely different story about this Red Wings team, where I think we might even be in a wild card spot or even a point or two outside the wild card spot, because you look at, and this is a player we'll talk about, like a Bertuzzi, and then you talk about the Verana, where Verana very much, if you look at his numbers, where he could very easily, if he played a full season, could put up 30 goals. And Bertuzzi, we saw him put up 30 goals. So at minimum, you're at least missing 40 to 50 goals from those two alone. And that can equate to you at least 2 to 3 extra wins. So like I said, yeah, that could put you into that wild card spot. So that's something that the Red Wings were really missing. And so I guess, like, going back onto Andrew Kopp, the 4 years at $5.625 million, I like the contract. I like the contract. It's definitely way better than last year when we got Suter, who only put up just under 40 points, so we do have a luxury there where we did upgrade at our 2C. But I do see a future, kind of like where you said, where once Marco Kasper gets in here and learns from the 3C or even on the wing, eventually you're going to swap Andrew Kopp into that 3C, or you might even put him on the wing. Me personally, I firmly believe that next season you give Kopp one more chance. And I don't mean that in a condescending way where I think he's doing bad, but I think you give Kopp that one more year. And, if Marco Kasper can prove to you and show to you that he can play defensively responsibly, that you could put him at the 2C spot, and maybe Andrew Kopp just put him on the wings to be his mentor, So I think Andrew Kopp is doing pretty good for this season, but for me, I expect more out of a 2C, but I think that's only because.
Well, keep in mind, Zach, he's not really supposed to be a 2C. So just keep that in mind.
Right. No, 100%. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. And that's kind of why I would much rather have him on the wing. But granted, that's also coming from the fact that we don't have a 2C still, even if we wanted to put him on the wing. So he is our best option at 2C for now.
Mm-hmm. And so, talking about the wing, I could definitely see why you would want to do that. But I think with a player like Kopp, I think he could play wing. But he's also the kind of guy where I feel like if he plays wing, he's not really gaining anything else in his game than he is playing center, if you know what I mean. I think he's much more suited to play the center position, and that might maximize what he has to offer versus playing on the wing. Because he's not really a goal scorer. He's more of like a I guess you could call him a playmaker. Really, he offers more in just intangibles than playmaking, but you might have to do that. It might be necessary to do that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I more so think that he'll stay at the 2C and Casper will start out at 3C. And also, I don't really know if he's even going to make the team out of camp next year, Casper. I mean, he might be fine to take some time in the AHL. It just kind of depends on what he looks like in training camp. But I'll tell you this much, the way he's looked this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes the team. But
yeah,
Casper's
sure,
a discussion for another time. I could do a whole pod on Casper because right now he's my favorite prospect. I mean, I was so high on Ratu earlier, I almost feel that Casper might even have a higher ceiling.
Yeah, Casper's looked really good. And yeah, there is a very good chance that he can make the roster next season. And he's got every opportunity to, and that's his opportunity to take it. But yeah, let's move on to the next player. And this is another big one that we have some decisions that we have to make on. That would be Tyler Bertuzzi, coming in at $4.75 million. This is his last year, turning into a UFA. This is another fan favorite where a lot of people would like to keep Bertuzzi. But unfortunately, with two big injuries, both of his wrists being broken, and then one smallerish one where he had, I believe it was a lower body injury, so that put him out for a couple games. But he's only played 10 games so far this season, and he only has 17 games, and he only has 5 points, 1 goal, 4 assists in those 17 games. That's really not the worst, but it definitely could be better considering that he put up 62 and 68 last season. And, we know that he can do better. And what are your thoughts on Bertuzzi this season, and what do you see moving forward with him?
Oh God, this is gonna be like the toughest one we do tonight to figure out. Because if I'm gonna be honest with Tyler Bertuzzi, you can go three ways with him, and neither one of them are the best option, in my opinion. It's I don't really want to get down on the kid because it sucks to be injured. You know, as upset as you and I and the rest of the fan base is that he's been injured all year, I guarantee you he's at least 5 times more upset with himself. Because no player wants to miss that amount of time. I think out of the three options that equally suck, the least sucky one is to just ship him at the deadline and get whatever you can for him just based on reputation. And that would also come with a big factor of him staying healthy until then, which we've seen this year is no guarantee, and hopefully he can produce. I think with the plan this year for Bertuzzi, I don't really like how it was handled. I think when he came back initially from that injury, he probably should have got a small stint down in Grand Rapids for conditioning because he had missed basically the whole year. And we knew him coming in, he had no play time under his belt basically. I think he only played 5 or 6 games before he came back, so I would have liked to see him get a conditioning stint. Um, at the same time, if you want to sign him for a low term, maybe a 1 year prove it deal with like 4 to 5 million, I suppose I could see that. I don't really. That's like the second best option to me because he's a guy that I hate to lose him because I know he'd be so valuable when we're in the playoffs and his game just is suited so well to playoff hockey, which also at the same time is why I would want to ship him off. I mean, I have no idea. It's kind of like a situation where like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You know what I mean? Like every option is available to you, and none of them are good.
One thing I want to bring up is, you know, I guess I should ask this. So, are you in favor of trading, or are you in favor of bringing Bertuzzi back?
Yeah, I guess I didn't really clear that up, did I? Um, I'd
That's okay.
say you'd have to think about what you could even get for him if you trade him.
Just off
And
the top of your head, no remorse type of feeling. Just go with it. Well, personally, in your own opinion, would the Red Wings be better off with or without a Bertuzzi?
I think they'd be better off with him on a 1 year prove it deal.
Okay.
Because this
Okay.
year, if you really wanted to trade him, and let's be honest, going into this year, he was our biggest trade piece, he could have got a lot more at the deadline than what he's going to get now. And I feel like if you're just going to trade him for whatever you can get, that's not great asset management, although there's not much else you can do there. I think to sign him to 1 more year would be the best thing to do. The only issue with that is you have to get him to agree to that. And I don't think at this point in his career he's going to agree to that. But that's what I would do.
So, a couple things that I wanted to bring up is that we very much like to listen to other Red Wings podcasts here, much like the Winged Wheels in the Lockdowns. At least for me, I'm very much a Locked On guy. But on Winged Wheel, when they posted theirs today, they talked about how we can't keep missing on these trade pieces when we have these opportunities to trade these players. And one player that they talked about that came to mind was Mike Green. That scenario where we had Mike Green, we could have traded him, and we just simply did not, and we re-signed him. And it's bringing almost kind of like a PTSD feeling to Tyler Bertuzzi, because you're right, like where last year he had his best season. Not saying that that's going to be the only time that he's going to have a good season, but that was by far his best season point wise and just overall tangibility player wise. He looked really good, and he on most nights looked like he was one of the best players on the Red Wings roster. So if you're going to trade for Tyler Bertuzzi, you have to do it this season. If if you're going to extend him, I think trading him even down the line is just thrown out the window. Not only did he have the 2 wrist injuries this season, but that back injury from a couple of years back really scares me.
That's what
Those
scares me
don't
the
go
most.
away. Those catch up to people, right? They just don't go away once you have the surgery, right? It's not like that. And this is something else that I can't remember which one it was, but I do know that Lockdown Pod, they did mention that in the last game against the Islanders, which the Red Wings lost 2-0 too, by the way, Bertuzzi was one of the better defensive players on that team that night. I don't know the statistics and the analytics of it all, and I can't pull it up, but yeah, if you want to go check out Lockdown Podcast Red Wings, they talk all about that, but they mentioned that, and I found that quite interesting because we had kind of talked about a couple nights ago how it's kind of almost similar to how they're treating Bertuzzi is what they did to Mantha that season, where they traded Mantha, where he wasn't producing point wise, but he was trying to show that he was defensively responsible. And I think that was kind of like a selling point to the Washington Capitals is why isn't Mantha scoring? And this is where I think you sell it as in like, well, we just don't want him to put himself in situations where he can get hurt. So we want him to be more defensive responsible. So that way, come trade deadline, they got the Jakob Vrana and the pick and the Richard Panik. That's how it happened. And I can see it similarly happening with Tyler Bertuzzi. If Tyler Bertuzzi can just keep himself healthy from now on January 30th, today, until the trade deadline on March 4th, I think the injuries that happened earlier this season at that point are pretty much just washed away because that's more than enough time for a player to get ready for playoff action, get in there, be the nose grinding heavy kind of guy that you are, the guy who gets under the people's skin, get in front of the net, get the tip-ins, get those dirty goals, do what you have to do to make it. And, that's what Bertuzzi is. I'm assuring you that that's probably what him and his agent are talking about right now, that be ready for the expectation to get traded and to put on a show for the playoffs so that way you can earn that contract that the Red Wings weren't willing to give you. Because that's what he's going to have to do if he does get traded. Me, personally, I am right now on the bandwagon to move him. And I'll say this to you, that one of the podcasts mentioned this, and I can't remember which one it was. It was either Locked On or it was either Winged Wheel. You have to look at it this way. You had Bertuzzi, you had Vrana, and you had Larkin, Raymond, and Fabry. So 5 forwards that those were arguably your main top 6 players, right? So this offseason, you added a Kopp, you added a Perron, you added a Kubalik. Those 3 players, when you look at them, are pretty much replacing Vrana, Bertuzzi, and possibly even a Fabry. When you look at it like that, and that was pretty much a test for Yzerman to be like, and you mentioned this, they're almost kind of like not roadblocks, they're not just stall gaps, but they're players to
complementary
compare.
pieces.
They're Jesus, yes, you got the word right, and I obviously cannot say it.
Yeah, don't use that
Complementary
word.
players, yes, ever, don't. Complementary players, but also it's a better visual for Yzerman to be like, okay, maybe this is the direction that I want my top and middle 6 to go. Now that I have someone who can put up the same as Tyler Bertuzzi, and I think that was supposed to be Kubalik or Perron. I don't know who Andrew Kopp was supposed to replace, but I bet my bottom dollar that was probably going to be Fabry if a team came knocking on Fabry. And that's going to be next season, in my personal opinion, because of the injury that he had. But I could be wrong. He comes in pretty cheap. I mean, Robbie Fabry, he makes $4 million for another 2 years after the season. That's really not a lot for a player. But any team that he goes on, he would probably be in their middle 6 for sure. But either way, for me, I think that the Red Wings could move on with Tyler Bertuzzi and there would be nothing that would really affect the team overall. But I do believe that if you are getting rid of a Tyler Bertuzzi, you have to bring in someone to replace him, and that person has to be better. Because you don't know what's happening with Verana. You don't know if he's coming back. You don't know if Kubalik can get off of this like little cold streak that he has. He hasn't looked the same ever since that hot streak at the start of the season where he was almost 2 points per game. You know, he's definitely fallen off a little. How much more can Michael Rasmussen keep putting up? He's been looking good, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But me personally, yes, I do think that the Red Wings should move on Tyler Bertuzzi, even if the offer isn't what you're expecting. If you can somehow get a first or a player in like a second or a third, like a prospect, I think you have to take that.
This is for Bertuzzi. You think you can get that?
I think you could, especially for
No,
someone who makes 4.75 right now. Personally, if that team, whoever trades for him, wants to sign him again, I think Bertuzzi is in that 6 mil range, the 7x6, personally. But that
sounds about right.
I don't want to go too far off topic with that, but that's where I stand on it. It's not that I don't like Bertuzzi. I love Bertuzzi, and I think that he could add a lot of value to this team once we make the playoffs. However, going into a different topic, I don't think that the Red Wings will be making the playoffs in the next 2 years, personally. But like I said, that's a different topic. But I want to go into talking about. Let's talk about Michael Rasmussen. We're going to skip over some players, and that's okay because we'll just talk about after the. We're gonna do 2 more players. After these 2 players, we'll talk about an overall grade for the forwards and where we think that they're at. So let's talk about.
Okay.
Who did I say? Michael Rasmussen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Rasmussen, where he's kind of having that turnaround season, even though he is still very much young. And yes, it seems like he's been in the NHL for a while. I mean, 228 games and 81 points, but from a player who played 80 games last year with 27 points, he now has 46 games played with 24 points. So he's only 3 points back from his point total, and that's really good for someone who we weren't. And I can say this, I think for a lot of fans, that not many people were excited for that pick, and that was, to be honest with you, just a really weird draft.
This is very
But
weird.
what do you think of Michael Rasmussen so far? I mean, last year he signed that $1.46 million contract for 3 years, so we got him locked in for next season too with RFA status. Is this someone where you could see taking over that 3C spot for years to come and maybe eventually be a low tier 2C? Or is this kind of like the ceiling that we're going to see from Michael Rasmussen moving forward, where this is probably the best we're going to get out of him? What are your thoughts?
So Michael Rasmussen is an interesting one because I, for his whole career, have never been able to figure out what the hell this guy is going to be. Now, what I tell you he's not going to be, there's no chance in hell he's going to be a center on the first, second, third, or fourth line. Every single time we've seen him move to the wing, which is what he's done recently while he's playing with Larkin, he's lit it up. I don't ever want to see this kid play center again. In my opinion, he is not the center in the NHL. He is a winger, and he has proved that is what he is supposed to be. And that being said, I don't know what line that's going to be on because this kid is knocking down the door, swinging his big dick around 1 minute, and the next minute he disappears for 10 games. So he is still young. He, in my opinion, has not hit his ceiling yet, and it's kind of hard to figure out what his ceiling will be. I don't really see this being the best we'll get from him. If I had to make a guess, I would say his ceiling is somewhere around mid 40s, maybe 50 points. I would say that's his ceiling. I think he potentially, if need be, whether through injuries or just whatever else, he could be a top 6 player. I think he's probably best suited for the bottom 6 as a winger, maybe a third line winger. I'd say he's just talented enough to not be on the fourth line. I think he's a good third line winger, and that's where I would put him.
Yeah, as of right now, I mean, he's projected to play 80 games with 42 points. So that's pretty league average for a middle six forward that you're expecting from, right? I mean, I remember, and this might be changing here pretty quickly, considering how many players are going to be over 100-point goal score, or yeah, just point scorers in the league this year. It's pretty ridiculous on how scoring has gone up in the last couple of years with just a few minor tweaks and changes in the league there.
But I'm glad it has. More goals equals more fun.
Yeah, but I remember being in a league where it was you expect your top line players to get you anywhere from like the 70 to 90 points, then your second line getting you the 60 to 70, maybe 80 points, then your third line gets you the 40 to 60, then your bottom line can get you like damn near 20 points or something like that. That's what I'm used to expecting. So yeah, I mean you're quite there where he projects as that middle six forward where he can be that elite. Me personally, I think not, elite's a strong word, but I do think he could be a really, really good 3C. I mean, even with his body size, his weight, his
No, no, no,
long hair.
not 3C. Not 3C. I don't ever want to see him at center again. He's not a center. I want to see him at wing.
Hey man, he looked pretty good on that top line when Larkin had that bum hand. So I don't know. You might have to be eating some words here in a couple years or so. Who never knows? And that's the other thing too. Like I said, he's only 24. He's not really like in his prime yet. And I think a lot of Wings fans still hold a grudge at the fact that he was drafted at the spot that he was, and
Mm-hmm.
that year that he did get drafted, he had to go back to the WHL. And then that following season, it was either he had to play in the WHL again or come to the Wings, and he played with the Wings, and he just looked completely lost out there. Like he just did not
Mm-hmm.
look like he belonged in the NHL, and I think that really left a bad taste in everyone's mouths. And every year, every team wants to have that player that is the hype story, right? He is the hype story so far this season with the turning around that he has had this season.
What a
Me
shocker that not every single first round pick at 19 years old can just walk into the NHL and be a point per game player. I mean, why do people even think that? Do they just think that, like, because McDavid went first overall, oh, he walked in and he was a point per game player, any first round pick can do it? Like, why do people think that? Barely anyone can do that.
And that's not to call out anyone that I know specific, but I do know someone who's like that. And granted, they don't. It's when you're probably not as familiarized with like these young players, and you look at consistently drafts that are kind of like maybe not so much as the NBA, but the NBA kind of does it too, where like you draft these players that are like 19, 20 years old and they automatically get to play. But like even in college football, where you're drafting these 22, these 21, these 20-year-olds to come and play, and they get to play right away, right? Where in the NHL, it's different. You're drafting these 17, 18-year-old kids, and then you're almost kind of just like, you're like, oh, here you go, Billy. Go play against Brad Marchand, or go play
Mm-hmm.
against Eric Carlson. Go play against Brent Burns. There you go. Good luck. Go score 50 goals for us. It ain't going to be like that. That's okay. And you're right. Like some fans kind of do have that expectation, but I can't really blame them, because that is something that we really want, and that is something that we would love to expect out of them. But when it comes to just learning and understanding like players and just like how the draft in general works and like where these players are coming from, I think once you start to gain that knowledge, that like you're going to understand it a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, Michael Rasmussen, I don't foresee him panning out to really being a 2C. If injuries happen, he could fill that role. I do think he plays responsible on the defensive end. That's why they put him on the PK for a reason. He's really good at that. Um,
You know, Zach, I'm going to start calling you Zach Lalonde because you keep putting him at center. He's not supposed to be a center.
Bam, I like it. Zach Lalone.
Zach actually has a good ring to it, Zach Lalonde. No, but ever since he moved off the center, I mean, it's no coincidence ever since he moved off that his game has elevated. I think you need to look at that and say to yourself, okay, we drafted this kid to be a center, but hey, look at him on the wing. He's scoring. He's making plays. That play he made to Fabry in OT was absolute beautiful. I don't know. He's not a center. Maybe he could develop into that. He's still young. Don't stick him at it now because it's just, in my opinion, that's not what he's supposed to be in the NHL.
Well, the other issue is that while you might be right, and you're obviously right to your own opinion, but the issue is it goes back to like the whole Larkin thing that if we got rid of Larkin, we're gonna make Hop our 1C. So if we moved Rasmussen over, you could replace him with Joe Veleno, who could play the 3C. But then like it's the same thing, you know? Then it's just like we don't really have the versatility to where we can say, I'm not saying Rasmussen is the best 3C right now. And I'm not saying that Joe Veleno eventually could. I'm not saying that he couldn't be that 3C.
In my mind, that's the ceiling.
But I do think that Michael Rasmussen is our best 3C now and moving forward into the future. And those are just as important. You need those 3Cs. You need good players on cheap contracts. And I think that Michael Rasmussen can be that player that you can keep on the cheap to be that really good 3C. And if he turns out to be a Darren Helm, but better, that can actually score when he gets on the breakaway, fan-freaking-tastic. I'll take it all day. Especially if he comes under that $4 mil contract that he had when he was with us, that Darren Helm contract. What was that, 4.25? And that was even 6 years ago when he signed it when the cap was ridiculous. So imagine after this contract with Michael Rasmussen at 1.46, if we can get him for under 4 mil at a 3C, that is a steal, in my opinion. And Iserman, I hope you're watching this. I know you're not. It's just our first episode by Hockeytown University. Listen up. Take my advice. Under 4 mil for Rasmussen on his next contract. Please, if you decide to keep him. And he does have RFA status, so that's someone that could be traded as well. But another day, another dollar. So the next player, I'll let you take your pick on this one. I'll let you choose. And I have two choices for you. Do you want to talk about Lucas Raymond or do you want to talk about Joe Veleno?
In regards to just how they've been this season?
Yeah.
Let's start with Raymond.
Do you want to do both or do you just want to do one?
Let's just do Raymond for tonight.
All right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Lucas Raymond, 20 years old. Second season. It's a sophomore year. Had a bit of a slow start this season. Has kind of been doing better as of late. I mean, he's fourth in the team in scoring. He's got 32 points in 48 games. Last time I looked, he was on pace for 58 points in 82 games. Now that's dipped to 82. 82 games, 55 points in the season. It's the season before he put up 82 games and 57 points. So a little bit of dip in the production pool, but he is on pace to break his goal scoring record, which was 23, and he's projected to get 26. So the assists have dropped down a little bit, but also that comes with the whole Bertuzzi being out. That's their top line: Bertuzzi, Larkin, Raymond, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what it should have been.
And there was I can't remember if it was yesterday or a couple days ago on Twitter that someone came out and said, and it could have been an article saying that Raymond is a defensive liability with his line mates, saying that when it's just him and Larkin, they get more outscored than they would with Bertuzzi. And then, there was a whole bunch of other things, but they were basically trying to say that, Raymond is the defensive liability on that line, that this is something that you need to keep up with. Now, mind you, I want to debunk this at the sheer fact that while we have all these numbers with Larkin and Raymond without Bertuzzi, and it is easy to point the finger at a 20-year-old in his second season being your defensive liability, we don't have the numbers with Larkin and Bertuzzi without Raymond other than when they were on those really bad teams. So it's skewed there a little bit. So let's say the roles were reversed. I think personally that Larkin and Bertuzzi without Raymond would get scored on way, way more than Larkin and Raymond have been. Personally, I just think that Raymond plays a very when I watch him, it seems like he does all the little things right. Like there are some times where you see him kind of lose the puck, or like the puck gets off his stick a little bit, and then like kind of just gets the puck taken away. Like he's learning still, but I don't see where we should be panicking about a 20-year-old in his second season and calling him a defensive liability when the whole team just really is not playing the best defense all around in general.
Man, it's crazy. It's almost like we didn't draft him to play defense when we wanted him to score. Isn't that wild? Yeah, I guess if we wanted a defensive player on the fourth line, we would call up, I don't know, Adam Ernie. Like, take your pick. Like, this to me is just the stupidest thing ever, and it's kind of what I hate about, like, hockey media in general. Like, he could be on a 100-point pace, and if his plus minus is -1, oh, he's a defensive liability. He's no good. Who cares? What are you talking about? And if you don't even have a complete top line, I mean, we haven't even had Bert the whole year. Yeah, no kidding, you're going to get scored on when you have 2/3 of a top line. I mean, this is just the stupidest thing to me. And you want to know what else? I have something else to say. You can teach an offensive player to play defense. You cannot teach a defensive player to play offense. So I think I'd rather have the guy whose defense at 20 years old, mind you, is not there yet, and you can teach him to play more defense because he's 20, he's young, he'll learn. I mean, I don't know. This to me is just the dumbest thing ever. Like, this kid next year could be on a point per game pace, and I bet you people are still going to nitpick his game. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that this is a bad stat to bring up, but even last season, you plus minus is not the greatest
It's a team
stat to
stat.
look
I've
over.
always said it's a team
I,
stat.
I yes, and I get that, but it still is a stat nonetheless. But either way, you look at last season where whether if you want to say it was him or the team in general, a -32, and then you look at this season, he's only a -9. I mean, that's 20 that's 23 goals difference. So you're telling me that he's doing, and it also said that he was doing worse this season than he was last season defensively. So it's like how, yeah, something just doesn't really add up. And like I said, I mean, you're missing not even just 2/3 of your top line, but you're missing 2/3 of your top six with Verana even being out too.
Right.
So
Yeah,
like
I didn't
that's
even
a
mention that.
huge
Yeah.
thing where you're riding on some of these players to put out more than probably what they can handle, and that's going back to Lucas Raymond's age. And granted, yes, he is supposed to be good, but you can only be as good as the team around you as well. And we have Larkin,
To me,
Snyder.
I don't know why you're
That's it.
I don't know why people are making Raymond the target of just all this negativity. I mean, the kid's 20 years old. He's not even close to his ceiling yet. He's still developing. That's a crazy thing to think about, that he's still on pace for like 60 points and he's not even close to his ceiling. Like, this kid, when he reaches his prime, you can make the argument between him and Sider, he's going to be the best player on the team. I mean, the sky's the limit with this kid. And, like, if he still is not playing the best defense, I'm not going to lose sleep over it if he's scoring 40 goals a year. I've always said that the best way to make up your lack of defense is just score a shit ton of goals. Hey, you can
Look
you
how
can
that's
you can
working
win
out
nine
for
eight.
Vancouver. Look at Vancouver. You see how that's working out for them?
Hey, Zach, tell me, which one would you rather do? Would you rather win 1-0 or would you rather win 9-8? I know which one I would want to choose.
Tell them who you would want to choose.
Well, I just want wins at this point anyways. But yeah, if I I don't want to lose one. I don't want to win 1-0 every game. That's going to be boring. 9-8, it's a shootout, but you're still winning. I don't know. Maybe that was a bad example. It's getting late. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. But no, my
All
point
right.
is like he's a young kid. His game is only getting better. He's not even close to his ceiling. You can teach the kid defense. And if you can't, he'll still score 40 goals. I don't know. It's kind of just a dumb argument to me. And it feels like we're nitpicking a bit when there's actually much bigger problems on this team, and we really are not in a position to nitpick anything.
You're kind of right when you say that too, and I didn't even like think about it that way. Is you kind of are nitpicking at a player when there's really what is the reason for you to really nitpick at him for? I mean, granted, we are kind of doing that with all these other players. Like people are doing it with Cop, people are doing it with Bertuzzi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People even do it with Adam Ernie, and Ben Sherratt. But like, yeah, I mean, I can see where people don't want to talk about Lucas Raymond flaws because he is much like Sider, kind of one of our golden boys, much like Larkin. So I think fans want to push away that negative energy, and I don't blame them. But this is life, and these are the tough topics and situations that we do have to talk about, right? That they're relevant, they're real, and we should talk about them, even if we don't want to. And that can be scary, but for the future of this team, if there is a worry about Raymond's defensive liability impact on the ice, then I'm certain that that will get changed and that will fix down the road. But
Yeah, the
let's take another 5 minute.
with all this nitpicking, the funniest thing to me is like I feel like this is what like Toronto fans are sitting around doing. Like, yeah, Mitch Marner, he might score 100 points, but he can't really play defense. It's like, are we really in the position to be doing this right now? We have legitimate problems. We have a captain that we don't know if is going to return next year. We have two forwards who have been out the entire year. Let's go ahead and take our fourth overall pick, 20-year-old promising player, and basically say to him, "Hey kid, you suck at defense. Get better at defense." Like, what are we even doing here?